but I call it business, business, business. So I have been subjected to a single segment to cover any business news. So there was some
get in your business hole.
Yeah, getting my business groove on, my business time. So yeah, there was a few financial quarter ends, so I thought we'd just quickly cover it. So from a Microsoft point of view, headline number around gaming, they did $15 billion in sales, the record for Microsoft. And just quickly on Sony, they also did a record, which was 24 billion, which I think for me, the overall takeaway on these two things is they've finally been able to break the back of the cyclical nature of launching consoles, which I think will then also make it interesting about mid-gen upgrades. So typically and historically, when companies have launched a console, they always have a down year. They even lose money, and Sony lost a hell of a lot of money with the PS3. They have literally broken that, and they still are making big profits and record sales as well.
I wonder, and maybe your analysis might get into this a bit, but we know that the pandemic has been beneficial for gaming in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
I wonder, do you think that those numbers would have been higher or lower if we didn't have a pandemic?
Oh, way lower.
Yeah,
way lower.
It's wild to think that, the people are buying these new machines in these times because they want something new and so exciting to get them away from their, and they're stuck at home, and things like that. It's nuts.
Yeah, and I think it's also people just want to find things you can do at home, solitary activities, but connecting with people. So anything big tech related is up huge amount. Like since the pandemic started, I think big tech, so the Apples, Facebooks, Googles, I think they're up 40% from memory since the pandemic started, which is insane given how much they were valued before that. Just going back to Microsoft, they are pushing pretty hard into the PC space in a really interesting way for me. I don't know if you guys have ever even opened up the Microsoft store. Well, definitely Swinny would have because of achievements.
Of course.
But Mike, have you opened up the Microsoft store? Do you even know what that is?
As in the store on Windows?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've opened it up multiple times, yeah.
To me, that is not a thing. I don't think of it in the same way as Epic Game Store or Steam or anything like that. But, they're doing some interesting stuff, Microsoft. So historically, they had a 30% take rate for any games that they sold on there. They are moving it down to 12%, which is exactly in line with Epic Games. So developers are now going to be taking 88% of the profits, the revenue, from games that are sold on the Microsoft Store, which to me is insanely smart because it comes installed by default onto Windows. It also means that as a developer, I actually wouldn't have looked to publish it on the Microsoft Store. But now that there's such a disparity, you go, well, okay, I can probably put it on the Microsoft Store, do a bit of a discount, and I'll make even more money. And then if you've got it on the Microsoft Store, it means that you're then a good candidate for PC Game Pass.
Yeah, Game Pass is the blessing that store needed. It's just wild. I know I think you can install straight out of the Xbox app. You don't need to touch the store, but still, it's obviously that's the back end. It's whether or not it looks like the store or it looks like the app, it's still the Microsoft Store in what that you're downloading from.
And my free advice to Microsoft, honestly, I think from a gaming point of view, they need to give up and just call everything related to games on Windows Xbox. Yeah. I do not know why they want to persist with a Microsoft Store with a gaming tab rather than just call it the Xbox Store. To me, that would make more sense. I'd go, I just open up the Xbox Store and buy games on my Windows PC. I don't know. I find it really nuts.
But see, we're in that ecosystem and stuff. I can imagine a lot of people who aren't into Xbox or PlayStation or whatever, and they see a games tab.
Maybe. And just on the numbers, so GOG still has a 30% take rate, and Steam's a weird one. They have 30%, but if you're selling 50 million sales, they'll push it down to 20% incrementally. So they're pushing really hard in PC. It's quite interesting. They made a lot of announcements around PC, which I'm glad because I only have the PC component of Game Pass Ultimate. And even their CEO, Satya Nadella, actually spoke about Game Pass, which I think was one of the first times he really spoke about it at any length on analyst call, which kind of interests me. And just like, I just want to read out the wording because the language to me is quite interesting. It's with Game Pass, we are redefining how games are distributed, played, and viewed. Just last week, we added cloud gaming via the browser, expanding our reach across PC and mobile. And just to me, it's like he literally did not say the word console or Xbox or anything like that, you know?
Yeah, expanding our reach. To me, there's thing there that say, okay, well, we know that we're in that space already. But yeah, no.
But the focus is just on Game Pass is the medium, you know, now. Game Pass it's almost like Game Pass is Xbox from the future in their mind, which makes sense. And I think it's very much like Netflix. Netflix originally was sending out DVDs and they had a little bit of streaming business on the side, and then that became their whole business. I kind of can imagine Xbox in the far distant future just being a service, and that is what Xbox is. And the last thing, just which is also a link on Gamers of some other year, Minecraft now has, and this is up from before, now has 140 million monthly active users. That just like blows me away. Every month, there's 140 million people playing
I added
Minecraft.
an extra one. I caught up with my girlfriend's fam last night, and her niece, cousin, whatever, the one that I got the Switch for, she was playing Minecraft on it with her friends. Yeah, so there you go. That's another one added to the list.
On Sony, so I covered the 24 billion headline gaming division sales, which is massive. Sony is already like the best-selling console in the US ever up to this point, which is pretty interesting. They themselves are not targeting a better year than what the PS4 did for the full year of sales, but that is due to shortages in hardware. It would be really interesting to know how many sales they would have done if there weren't any shortages. And the split between digital and physical, obviously with the pandemic, has shifted pretty aggressively, but you're now talking about 2 out of every 3 games being bought digitally instead of physically, which is
interesting. Yeah,
sad for me as a physical collector.
It's also it's sad. It's also sad from a value perspective.
Oh yeah,
you can't, like, you pay $99. They're all full price. I don't want to start that discussion again, but it's crazy, and you can't trade them in. You can't get them cheaper elsewhere. It's like,
can't
you want to pay
them.
the 99, play the 99.
Yeah,
can't return them. Can't do anything.
Oh yeah, like I think the return was $125 Australian.
Yep.
125?
Yes.
Oh, we'll talk about that in a second.
Yeah,
we will talk about that in a second.
I know what Mike would have done to get Returnal, but that's bonkers. And then the last thing is Capcom. Monster Hunter Rise has sold 6 million copies, and I just did the numbers. It's about the same pace. It's a bit below Monster Hunter World, which is pretty impressive given that it's only a single platform. And it's going to soon become the best-selling Capcom game that was released on a single platform, which, yeah, it's hugely impressive. That game has got massive legs, and if they don't release another game of that type, I just imagine it's going to have a really, really long tail. So I actually initially thought there'd be no chance it would outsell Monster Hunter World. I'm starting to think it actually might catch up to Monster Hunter World just because it's going to have a long tail on the Switch, and then when it gets released on the PC. And then I wonder if it will get released on the PS4 and Xbox eventually. Maybe.
Well, to me, it all hinges on also how they handle the expansion side of things, because the way it used to work with Monster Hunter is that they would release another version that was an upgraded version, whereas with Iceborne, that was an expansion on top of World. So essentially, Iceborne purchases were counted as World sales, where, I guess you could say, okay, well, these 2 particular versions of Monster Hunter are treated as the same from a number standpoint, but they were different games. So I can almost see them going back to the old model with the Switch one because of just the infrastructure with like the way they handle expansions and stuff. But I don't know. It depends.
I think they're going to follow the same example because everything they've done so far is exactly what they've done with World. So they just released version 2 the other day. So there's some more monsters and things like that, but there's also functionality that's now behind DLC, some base game functionality that they've pushed behind a paywall, which is what they did with Monster Hunter World as well. So I don't know. It seems like they're going to follow the same track, which makes sense. They made a lot of money the way that they did it with Monster Hunter World. So just the next bit of news. So this is now extremely self-indulgent of me.